It has been 2 years since the release of Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. Yeah, that might sound a little bit insane, but it's true, and I can't believe that it's, passed so fast. On November 30th, 2022, Darktide released. Set in the Warhammer 40k universe, it focused on the co-op gameplay with intense combat and atmospheric environments reminiscent of, what came before. Fatshark, the developers, has had a little bit of a history with games like this. I mean, they started off with titles like War of the Roses and then War of the Vikings. Then they later came back with Warhammer Vermintide, which was, of course, the fantasy setting that was very much related to Left 4 Dead and having that co-op horde shooter style. And then Vermintide 2 really kind of ramping up their popularity even more so. But I always said, and I think so many other people did, that it was time for a 40k variant. And they managed to do that, which is absolutely fantastic. But when Darktide came out, initial reviews were mixed, highlighting the impressive combat mechanics, the strong atmosphere and compelling co-op experience, yet many players stated a lot of technical issues, the lack of content, and of course balancing concerns. Later on, there was also talks about pay to win within the game, which didn't really make sense as it was co-op, but yeah, there was some pretty atrocious things that you could buy within the title itself. But Fatshark were not really going to be swayed by that. They responded to the community feedback by sharing a roadmap and committing to a lot of improvements. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over that roadmap and, what's been happening in the last 2 years of Darktide as a title itself, because it's been long and it's been very long. I'm very old now. Patch 8 released some balancing adjustments, focusing on issues with the Psyker class and specific weapon tweaks. The Psyker class being one of the most overpowered classes that could just pop people's heads whenever they wanted to. This update, though, really improved the combat smoothness, but it didn't resolve all the stability issues. There were some appreciated reactions from people, I think, but I think many players were still critical about the game's rough technical performance, despite it being a full-price title, and realistically people wanting a game that felt like it was worthy of the Warhammer universe. Because you see, 40k is something that is so rarely touched on within gaming unless it's some sort of turn-based grid shooter. And I don't want to see any more hexagons. I want to see something that is like a Warhammer Space Marine 2 or a Darktide being delved into more, because this universe is surely so profitable for anybody that even touches it. Yet people have avoided it for so long. Anyway, in January of 2023 into the new year, we got some incremental hotfixes and some small adjustments. These hotfixes included combat consistency and enemy behavior issues, addressing AI pathing and specific gameplay bugs. Fatshark then maintained consistent communication with his community, which is always great because it's not ideal when a game isn't really up to standards, and it's even less ideal when the developers just don't convey what they're going to do with it to their fans. But this maintains some optimism among players who anticipated way more content and deeper improvements. And because of that, player frustration remained. Look, there was still so many issues that weren't really necessarily just down to balancing and bugs. I think the main thing at the start was actually the fact of, there's not much content here, and what content is looks so similar. This is one of the main issues with Darktide when it came out. The game had a lot of maps that all looked exactly the same, and they all felt exactly the same. Vermintide had that a little bit, but it was just ramped up to 11 within Darktide. Because it was set within this hive city, every map was dark and dingy and trying to fight through corridors, and there was very little open spaces. It felt so much more linear than the first game. And even then, because of the AI and because of the way that they attacked you, it was just like you were fighting down corridors constantly, and you had no idea if you'd played that map before. Because, it looked like the last 14 that you'd had to go on. 14, what am I saying? They only had like 6 maps on launch. But there was still a dedicated player base that were really hoping for some substantial updates. Until we got our first major content release in April of 2023. This was Path of Redemption, and I remember when this came out, boy, it was exciting. There was a whole new award system and revised penances for achievements, an introduction of additional enemies and environmental conditions with new mission variants as well. A bit more content, something that people really wanted to see. This started to turn the community sentiment a bit. A warmer reception was coming, and it introduced meaningful gameplay changes and content expansions. However, there was still a lot more to come. So in August of 2023, there were continuous improvements to the game's stability, and in September of that year, a major update with cross-platform play. Patch 11 gave us crossplay between Steam and the Microsoft Store, allowing a more integrated multiplayer experience. Was this down to the slightly dwindling player base? Maybe. I think it was probably planned all along though. But this crossplay feature helped boost the player base and enhance matchmaking, as it was seen a really significant improvement for players' connectivity in the community. Players responded very positively once again, and more positive reviews. In fact, it started to be called very positive on Steam reviews as well, which was great because, well, it was a multiplayer game and they were finally putting some effort into improving the multiplayer. Always ideal. On October the 4th, 2023, we got a console expansion. Of course, this meant that the game would broaden its audience, bringing in more players. I know a lot of the PC players just don't really care about stuff that goes on in consoles, but I think it is important for, obviously, the experience in general. You see, actually, a console release does indirectly affect players on PC because they're selling more copies, they're broadening their player base, the audience is building, and that means that the developers are going to put more money, time, resources, and, well, be working on this game for longer with more updates because there's more people to please. Then, in November, we got the first anniversary in the Traitor Curse update. There was a new mission specifically themed for this anniversary. And of course, with more content updates, people were starting to get more happy. But it wasn't until April of 2024 that, well, the game completely changed. You see, a lot of the stuff up until then had been a couple of extra maps and a lot of patches and fixes. But we finally got a detailed blog post and some of the planned changes about a class overhaul. There was enhanced player choices with new skill trees and character builds and more unique class abilities to add depth and variety in playstyles. People were really starting to see the positives of this game now, and it was really starting to catch its audience back. In fact, its player base started to grow once more. This also came with September of 2024 with the Unlocked and Loaded update, the revamped itemized system which allows more customized gear and playing with clearer progression paths, new missions, and several social improvements such as guilds and enhanced matchmaking. And this was the real turning point. There was more and more very positive reviews on Steam, and the game started to really build a fan base. In fact, we can look at the Steam charts graph, and this was the second biggest peak that Darktide ever had, going from 5,000-6,000 concurrent players all the way up to 15,000-16,000 concurrent players, which was insane. An increase of over 10,000 players, absolutely massive for this game, and it's managed to sort of maintain a lot more players than, well, they had ever before. This is one of the greatest updates that just came out, and it meant that people really wanted to stick around. Now, of course, there was more quality of life patches that have been in the last couple of months. I think actually this month there's gonna be a lot of things coming into the game that people are really happy with. I think this month, actually, because the game has been on sale and things like that, we are now definitely into positive ratings. 82% of the last 30 days are positive, and of course we're sitting at very positive on Steam. I think the game has managed to redeem itself quite a bit, and that is quite interesting because it seemed like it was a game that was what everybody wanted in terms of its setting and the actual gameplay, but in terms of content, in terms of everything around it, kind of felt a little bit lackluster heading to its mixed reviews. But it seems that Fatshark has managed to do, well, the incredible. They've managed to bring back Darktide better than anybody has before, and I think this is a testament to the development team themselves, that they listened to fans and they stuck with the game. They didn't just bin it off when it didn't do exactly the way they wanted to do, but I think it sold pretty well, so I mean, I guess there was some reasons to keep going with it. But let me know what you think. With the new gameplay depth, stability, and content, I think it's managed to help shift player sentiment from mixed to largely positive now. But I'd love to know what you guys down in the comments are thinking. So make sure you head down there if you have any thoughts. But until then, I will see you in the next one.